Voters all across Minnesota and Wisconsin head to the polls tomorrow, narrowing the list of candidates in many races.
Tuesday's primary election will feature U.S. Senate seats in both Wisconsin and Minnesota. There's
also U.S. House seats on both sides of the border. In Minnesota's 8th Congressional District, voters will choose between Republican Rep. Pete Stauber and Harry Welty, along with Democrats Jen Schultz and John Munter. The two winners advance to November.
In Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District, there is only a Democratic primary. Kyle Kilborn and Elsa Duranso both hope to earn enough votes to challenge Republican Representative Tom Tiffany in November.
In Minnesota, we're also tracking the race for House 7B, an Iron Range district long held by the DFL that could actually turn red this year.
Current incumbent DFLer Dave Lislegard chose not to run for another term, which might have opened the door for a new party to represent the district.
The two Republicans will battle tomorrow to take down the lone DFLer in the race.
Reporter Isabella Zadra caught up with both of the candidates and shares their message to voters.
Minnesota's District 7B runs from the south shore of Lake Vermilion down to Alburn Township and sits at the heart of the Mesaba Iron Range. Cal Warwas.
It takes a person that's connected to the people and the actual work of the Iron Range, and that is something I bring to the table.
And Matt Matasich.
I'm a conservative guy, I'm a conservative Republican, and I am conservative on the issues.
Are trying to convince voters they're the best suited to take over the House seat that represents 7B. For around 80 years, the seat has been held by a Democrat. Regardless of any differences, both candidates have hope that they can turn the district red. Warwas is a third-generation miner and is proud to call the range his home. He refers to 7B as the most miningest district and wants it to stay that way.
Iron mining, sustaining mining operations is very important to me. It's the backbone of the Iron Range, but also expanding mining into precious metals projects is also extremely important. I've been a pro-mining activist since about 2016, looking for ways to expand opportunities for rangers all that time.
Warwas is a pro-labor Republican who plans to focus on restoring balance to state government, balance energy policies, and represent the people of the range on a higher level. As for Matasich, he also grew up on the range, but his campaign is influenced by taconite taxes. Matasich believes that local tax dollars should stay local and plans on introducing legislation to change the fiscal size of the taconite relief area and keep property taxes localized.
And when it comes to tax and spending in that, government is a service business, so run it so. That's what I run on issues. I don't run on how would I say, popularity contests. We run on the issues to make things happen.
Both men continue to run their campaign and influence voters in hopes of turning a new chapter in District 7B's political history. On the range, Isabella Zadra, Northern News Now.
The winner of the Republican battle for District 7B will face DFLer Lori Janitopoulos, who's running unopposed in her primary race.
And be sure to stick with Northern News Now all day tomorrow for the latest primary coverage. Hear from voters about what issues are most important to them during this election season. And stay tuned for live analysis with our political expert and the latest results both online and on Northern News Now at 10 o'clock.